Free advice.
Free advice.
Free advice.
Free advice.
Free advice. Free advice. Free advice.
I
Free
know you
advice.
want
Would you like free advice? Free advice.
I
Free
know you want
advice. Free advice.
I know
Free
you
advice.
want
Forever.
All right, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Free Advice Doomsday Edition.
Here we are. Quarantine edition.
Morgan and I are in our respective homes. We are not meeting up in person as we usually do for the episodes, but we thought it was important to still create something. I've taken a lot of comfort.
While respecting social distancing.
Yeah. We probably could get away with seeing each other or being each other's quarantine partner.
Quarantine. Yeah.
As long as we were exclusive and not
right.
then socializing with other people and spreading throughout a network like that. I don't know. We haven't discussed this until just now. Morgan,
Do you want to hang out?
do you want to hang out with me and no one else? Do you want to hang out with only me?
Ooh, that's interesting. Do I really have to contain it that way?
Yep.
Like I
You
can't
get to
tomorrow
see me.
decide that I want to
Mhm.
hang out with someone else?
You are committed to hanging out with me for 2 weeks if you do choose to see me. You don't have to see me. But if you see me, you can't see anyone else for 2 weeks.
This seems to really go against our polyamorous philosophies.
Yeah, I'll be honest, not a good time for the poly lifestyle and the poly philosophy. Our cause is not exactly thriving at the moment.
However,
The
I
arguments
will
for monogamy are
say,
strong at the moment.
although some people are finding monogamy to be too much and they're recognizing that, wow, when I spend all my time with this person, maybe some additional problems arise.
Oh, you talking about the China story?
Yeah, we're talking about the China story and the larger implications in general of just, I don't know.
Tell
I
the
mean,
people the
I've
China
been in
story.
my,
A lot of people don't know.
oh, so I mean, I only have a meme sized version, but
Tell the people about the
essentially
meme.
reports,
That's okay. That's all
reports are
anyone-
coming out.
That's all they're doing on
Reports
on the TV.
are coming out
anyway.
from China
Yeah.
about divorce rates going up because people have had to spend so much alone time together within their respective partnerships, which I find as a single person comical and as an empathetic person sad.
Yeah. It appeals to me as a storyteller, but my scientific brain says, how the fuck are we isolating that cause? How are we determining that that's why? You know, there's a lot of stressors, economic,
Yeah.
health-wise. People's family members are dying. There's extremely disruptive event happening right now in China. And to say, oh, it's because they had to spend so much time together might be oversimplifying. It just doesn't seem like a claim that you can make with any certainty about that's the cause of the increase in divorces. Certainly a good
Right.
clickbait title and something that we're repeating right now.
Yeah. Well, it just gives you something to think about, regardless of if it's true or not. It does make you think like, okay, how much contact, even with the people that I love, is too much right now. And if you are someone who's listening to this and you're with someone else, you may want to think about, okay, am I actually getting enough alone time? And I saw a post on Instagram, because Instagram has really been the only information channel that I'm currently taking applications from.
You're
and just
currently
taking in kind of just
applications from?
just meaning like I'm allowing myself to see what's on Instagram somewhat, but not really much of anything else.
That's scary.
I saw a post about people saying like, if you are quarantined with someone who is an emotional or physical or sexual abuser, reach out for support to the domestic abuse hotline. And, you know, that made me think of it again from just a completely different angle than I was thinking about it from my world, which is like, okay, I'm alone in my apartment with my 2 rabbits. I'm deciding what clients to see and not, virtually and not. And that just brings a whole other level of intensity to it that I hadn't even thought of. And everyone who posts about something that I hadn't even thought of, which is so many things, just makes me go, oh, wow. That's another thing. Like I had this thought pop into my head the other day of like, what about jails? What are jails doing? Like it just brings up all these weird questions.
Yeah. Some are releasing inmates early.
Yeah.
Here's a philosophical question for you.
Yeah.
It's the last man on Earth scenario. Imagine that the last other person on Earth is your mortal enemy, the worst person.
Okay.
Whoever the worst person in your life is, or you could imagine.
Yeah.
How often do you see
I don't have
them?
A lot of mortal enemies.
Sure.
So,
but imagine somebody who's just out to get you in every way possible.
Right.
They are trying to make you lose, and defeat you. How often do you interact with this person? Is it never? Do you really choose solitary confinement, like a world of no interaction? Or do you occasionally go into battle every year or so, like just for some kind of contact, even if it's negative? Like, apparently in prison, the worst punishment, I haven't had this, is solitary confinement. Like,
right.
the alternative is often all kinds of physical or sexual and mental abuse when you're interacting with people. Is it worse to have no interaction or negative interaction?
Yeah. As someone who is an introvert, but also enjoys people to some extent and does tend to get fairly stir crazy with too much alone time, I do think that, for a while it would be okay to just be by myself, and you kind of take that with the pros and cons. But then you do this internal need for human contact will just emerge eventually with a sense of urgency. I think that hunger or thirst or the need to breathe would. And at that point, yeah, you would have to reevaluate. And I would imagine that enemy of mine, whoever they are, would be having a similar experience. And so I think we would have to maybe use that shared sense of just needing each other to find some common ground. I would go for sort of a diplomatic approach of like, okay, how can we maybe use this forced connection that obviously we each need after a certain point to maybe resolve our differences, or at least talk about them and see if we can create more common ground.
They will pretend to work with you only to gain your trust to hurt you further.
Wow. You've presented me with a thought experiment sort of similar to this before, or at least like
Really?
revealed that you have this, not this exact thing, but like you have this very real sense of there's someone out there that's trying to get me.
Yeah.
And they're always coming back to this nefarious intention. Whereas I generally don't. I generally boil people down to the same thing, and that there's resolution and connection that can occur. So it's hard for me to even approach this in a vacuum, because I'm like, there would be something we could connect on.
You're trying to get?
No.
Oh, that's probably why I assume that there's someone out there like that for me. I just have this guy.
Yeah, tell me.
His name is Dale. And I was a sophomore in high school when I just overheard him at the food court of the mall one day disparaging a game that I liked. And I've thought about him every day since, and I'm going to get him.
Okay, so if you and Dale are the only two people left,
yeah,
what does that look like?
Well, he's not playing Super Monkey Ball with me, I'll tell you that much.
Damn.
I'm playing.
Doesn't that just say it all?
I'm playing either single player or I got a controller in each hand for multiplayer, but that's kind of like a sorry approximation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about imaginary friends? For someone who is self-quarantined, people talk to their pets, right? If you don't have pets, some people talk to their plants. If you don't have plants, people just talk to things.
I talk to myself a lot. And I mean, when I talk to my pets, I am kind of putting that in as a subset of talking to myself as the only human being that understands the words of what I'm saying. I sort of consider that under the bracket of talking to myself.
Yeah.
I used to have an imaginary friend when I was little.
Though
I think her name was Rose.
They do react some, right? Like there's some consciousness you can tell that volume
in the pets,
or tone does affect their reaction a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's safe
to say?
Yes,
definitely.
So it's kind of a continuum of like people, I might understand more of your communication, but there's still some gap between what you mean and I understand. And there's just perhaps generally a larger gap between the rabbits and me. But
That's a great
either
point.
way, you're never really being totally understood. Like what's your acceptable threshold for being understood by another thing? You might have to lower that in this time.
Yes, right now it's very low.
Okay.
I was talking to someone else about thresholds being lowered as it relates to the online dating world.
Oh, tell me
which
about
kind of
this.
brings us back to the topic that we were talking about before of like, what is polyamory doing in this landscape? I'll tell you, we're online.
Okay. What y'all doing on there?
It's a lot of just sort of opening conversations with people that you are curious about. I had someone who, hadn't answered me on one app, and then on another app was like, well, since I'm quarantined, I'm going to tell you my life story. So that was an interesting bit of data where I had previously decided like, okay, obviously this person doesn't want to talk to me, but then we matched on a different app and he felt that he had the time now to tell me everything. So I think people are more eager for connection, even if it is just virtual. And different people are kind of coming out of the woodwork for different things.
Do you ever look at love with the view that everyone is just saying, I'm scared to face myself. Will you hold my hand while I do it?
Not in those exact words, but ideologically, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And the quarantine situation too. It's like, who am I going to let in to brave this with me? Because, and that's what I was going to get back to the point about, like kind of lowering your threshold or lowering your standards for who that person is, what they look like, what ground do we have in common? It suddenly becomes more about just who can I connect with at this point, which is interesting.
I think that we should provide some context because I'm just now realizing that we both live in Los Angeles, follow the news regularly. Not all our listeners may do that. Today is Tuesday, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2020. And the city of Los Angeles has closed down all bars, nightclubs, restaurants, gyms, theaters, non-essential public spaces, essentially. And the White House has recommended people not gather in groups larger than 10. And the current consensus amongst our friends, I'd say, actually, I haven't discussed this with you, amongst my friends, is people should be staying home, that you shouldn't go out right now. San Francisco just asked people to take shelter at home. And it's not clear how long this is going to last. Earlier, within the last week, it seemed like, all right, this is for the next 2 weeks. And then I heard 2 months. And then yesterday, the president said this is going to last through July or August.
Fuck.
He doesn't know, but this, I had read reports that the coronavirus does not seem to be affected by heat or moisture. It doesn't seem to be killed by it. So there's no reasonable expectation that summer is going to just solve this for us. This could be something that we're in for the rest of the year, or, this could be like a, not take the entire decade, but could be like a decade defining event in the way that September 11th was and the fallout from all this. I think it's safe to say that this will be.
It will be. Yeah. I had a team meeting for one of my jobs last night, and it was actually really nice to just connect and get together in a group virtually again and talk about, okay, how is everyone coping with this, and getting a very again, realistic kind of picture of okay, what's the reality of not just our individual lives, but this business in this landscape, and defining it really as a new normal. We're just in a period of pivoting into what is the new normal now.
Yeah.
So I think that as as podcasters, as every chapter of my life and every facet of everything that I do, I'm searching for those answers of like, okay, for now, what's my new normal here? For this podcast, maybe us recording in this way is the new normal.
Unless you commit,
unless I commit
my
fully to
exclusive
you.
partner. Yes.
I'm not sure I can do that.
I'm going to get down on a knee. There's going to be a ring involved.
Oh my Lord. I am optimistically hoping for a sexual visitor. So I'm going to have to say TBD on your proposal since we would be non-sexual quarantine partners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would love to spend time with you, but if you need exclusivity right now, I can't give that to you.
I think it's wise. I mean, think about it. Going to a gathering of 10 people versus seeing 10 people one-on-one in the same week, functionally the same. So, like, start getting slippery with these lines. I don't know. There's so much game theory to this. So the current theory that I'm working under, which maybe you're not, is everyone should behave as if they already have the virus because you wouldn't know if you did. And the war, humans versus this virus, our best strategy is to like stay apart. If everyone were to not see another person and not spread contact with another person for 2 weeks, we would win, and it would be over. So that's not going to happen. That's unrealistic. But we can like I could survive not coming within 6 feet of another human for the next 2 weeks. I have enough food. I have I could go to the store and self-check out if I needed to, or I could even just fast. A lot of people can't handle that. But I am trying to behave that way as if I already have it. I don't think that I do, but I believe most people my age, or a lot of people my age, are asymptomatic and spreading it, and that's how it's grown. So that's the order I'm trying to follow. I think if I quarantined for 2 weeks straight and didn't have any symptoms, then I might be safe in picking a wife, a sick wife. I'm gonna dub it right now. You have to find yourself a husband or wife, and you both have to be quarantined for 14 days first.
It's the new reality show.
And then after your breakup, you need a period of 2 weeks, whenever that inevitably happens, because you get on each other's nerves after like one day of being in the same house together. You have another 2 weeks of solitude, and then you're allowed to pick a new person.
Mm-hmm. Can I tell you about something that's semi-related to this, but not really?
When you word it like that, how can I say no?
Well, I really want to tell you about my very recent virtual sexual encounter.
All right. I can handle it.
Okay. From what perspective are you struggling to know if you could handle it?
Just the kids listening. Not that I'm going to be jealous or anything.
Okay.
Just like, are we going to release that kind of adult content? I think as long
we
as
always
you
do.
use a fair amount of euphemisms, as long as you say things like whoopee.
As long as you use 1950s game show standards.
Yeah, just dial it back a couple generations to what was dirty talk like back then, and everyone would be okay with it. But if you start using like the aggressive what 10-year-olds are saying on TikTok right now to each other when they like fuck each other's eyeballs out of the sockets, then we're going to offend a lot of our older listeners. So please dial it back.
I could say there wasn't any of that.
Eyeballs both in.
But yeah, so eyeballs both in. Yeah, I had a very nice, very satisfying. I just really wanted to provide a data point on this, which is like there is connectedness and mutual release that can happen still without actually physically contacting someone. For those of us listening that may never have had an experience like this, or maybe like, what does that entail? Is this for me? It can be for anyone. I highly recommend. And it's also actually the digital realm I highly recommend using the digital realm to suss out.
Sorry.
What? What?
Are you you're acting like you're opening a portal to the digital realm. Never heard you call it that. Like it's some other world, like you're gonna have some ceremony where you're gonna burn some sage and you're gonna access the digital realm. Is that what it's like when you get on your phone or your computer?
So I set up my keyboard. I set up my screen.
Yeah. Tell me
I summon the lords.
Okay. Who are these lords? Well, you don't need to get into details if you're trying to protect their identity, but can you give, let's say that I'm somebody who's never had virtual sex before, and I'm curious about it.
Right.
First question.
Yeah. That's exactly what I want to handle.
How do I find a person to do this with?
Great question. So.
Where do I look? Do I just text all my exes, hey, you lonely too?
That's one option. That's one option.
Is that acceptable?
So yeah, you can
have the rules changed?
Anything is acceptable.
Anything is acceptable.
Anything is acceptable. Your favorite rule, Rob, is that it's okay to ask if it's okay for them to pass. So this means you can you can cast your line in a pool of previous connections. You can cast your line in a pool of new connections. It's up to you. It's up to them. What I wanted to say about the quote unquote digital realm is that it's a really safe space to test out your boundaries, because if someone crosses your boundaries, they're not in the same physical space as you. So there's a somewhat of a safety to
Counterpoint.
that. If your identity is protected.
Counterpoint. Unsolicited dick pics. Problem or no?
I have had problems with that in my life. Yes. But not in dating. So sort of like with murders, it's always someone you know and someone you think you can trust that's going to send you that unsolicited dick pic. Whereas at least my current filtration system or vetting system for who I'm interacting with online, everyone has been very polite. I've never gotten an unsolicited dick pic. I have solicited dick pics, but it's especially when you're in a community like the polyamorous community or the non-monogamous community or even the kink community, these communities that I think a lot of people from the outside think, oh, these depraved, sexually crazed individuals actually are really big on consent.
Do you
what?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt the PSA on poly people being big on consent. Some are, some aren't.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love to characterize this as positive, but there are, of course, people who identify as poly that are behave in damaging ways towards others.
Of course.
When you get a dick pic, I'm just trying. I've never received one, and
yeah. What can I tell you about that experience?
I'm wondering, do you zoom? Is there like, if we had an eye scanner, are you looking at the balls? Are you looking at the head? Are you kind of scanning up and down as if you were like optically massaging, stroking this picture of a dick? What is it like to look
so I'll
at
tell
a
you.
dick as you?
I'll tell you. If you just shut the fuck up, I'll tell you.
Actually, I'd prefer to imagine what it's like to look at a dick as you than to hear from you.
I don't want any woman's actual experience. I just want to see it from my male perspective.
Yeah. Can I just please imagine what it's like to be a woman and not have to listen to a real woman about it? It'll make me feel better.
So I sort of, the way that I do it is almost like personifying the penis. Like you imagine the head to have sort of, like a human face. It's kind of where, to me, it's my focal point. Like, where am I looking for that point of connection is like the head. Like what is that? Is it kind of a cyclops part communicating?
Like where the urethral opening is the eye? Is it a cyclops?
I would say it's not like I'm really particularly looking at that part like I would with eye contact.
Like
so I'm actually going to say, it's the ridge. I'm going to say it's like the ridge of the head.
That's the eye?
That's the eye line. Like that's where my eye most settles.
Okay.
And then, yes, it's up and down. It's like I'm doing a sort of sizing calculation and trying to understand, okay, relative to this person and their size, what would this dick be like relative to me if it were in the same space as me? I'm trying to like,
ooh, do you want
really
that to be subjective?
Develop a three-dimensional.
Is a photograph that includes references such as like a quarter near the base of the shaft, so that you
the most common reference would be their hands, or if I know how big they are.
Yeah, but their hands
person.
are also subjective, right? Like you might not be that familiar with the size of a person's hands, especially if it's someone you haven't met. Which
it depends if it's someone I've met or not.
Meeting someone in person, is it more exciting to receive a dick pic from them? Say you haven't seen either person's dick before, somebody that you've met in person versus somebody that you've not. Does that affect?
I think this varies person to person. For me, I'm more excited about a dick where I know it's connected to someone who I already have a connection or attraction to. I'm always more interested in that dick than a dick that's a question mark. Because I feel more safe, like, allowing myself to sort of be attracted to it, or like allowing myself to like be vulnerable in my sexual space with it if it's something that I already like, okay, I know who this is connected to. That person I have an emotional connection with. Which was the case for this particular encounter that I'm sort of referencing.
Do you think that there is a sweet spot for how much you know a person, and that you could know them too much for a dick pic to be enticing? Like, is there kind of a range?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Of the things that you could know about a person from a scale of 0 to 100%, where do you where would you guess the percentile of most intrigue towards dick pics?
65.
Lies? Once you know 65% of things about them?
I don't know. Now that I'm saying that, I'm like, oh, it's probably less. Because I think that it's more about once you know a certain percentage about someone, it means that there's a level of familiarity, and familiarity and like sexual attractedness, that kind of, the curve starts to go up and increase, and then it goes down at a certain point where, you're really familiar with that person and they're sort of familial in your relationship with them. You're not going to be as excited to sort of undress someone, so to speak, that you've had many encounters with, that you know them in and out. And I'm speaking just for me. Maybe someone's listening and feels like, nope, I am as sexually attracted to my longtime partner as any potential new person that I would only have 25% data on. Fucking cool. I want that. I'm envious of that.
I think that has more to do with a fear of the other in that person's case than it's just by comparison. I think that it's pretty natural. Like that's the way that desire works, that you need to have some amount of mystery or separation from the person to project desire into. Like there needs to be some empty space that you don't already have that question answered. It's a question, not like a finished statement, a period. I'd like to shift into some questions back to the crisis at hand. Okay. How does a person know if they're overreacting? I've heard a lot of discussion about whether we as a country are overreacting or not. What's the appropriate reaction?
I think that a couple answers, because those are kind of separate questions. Like the answer to the most recent question you asked is what's an appropriate reaction. I think that anytime there is crisis or trauma or some, a death, there is no appropriate response. Everyone is going to have whatever emotional response they're going to have, and there shouldn't be a prescription necessarily on what's appropriate or not. However,
are some responses more appropriate than others?
I was going to say, though, if you are sort of finding yourself very overwhelmed, emotionally reactive, stressed, on high alert, it's responsible to try to calm yourself down and contain that before almost psychologically infecting others. But if you have someone you trust that, can handle that level of panic in you and maybe helps you regulate it, great, open up to them. But I do think that that shared panic can really
We call those
escalate and infect much quicker than a virus, because it can happen virtually.
in the BDSM community. We call those people scream sponges.
What?
I said in the BDSM community, we call those people that can handle
I
your
heard
panic
you.
scream sponges.
Ah, okay. I've never heard that expression. I don't consider myself a part of the BDSM community.
I don't either. I also made up
Why
the
did you
term
use the
scream
word we?
sponge. Pretty fun.
Okay, the BDSM community does have a lot of vocabulary, is one thing that I'm learning from like online dating and new spaces, is
Yeah.
like, wow, there's a lot of terms for shit. I
they're-
don't know barely any of them.
They're leading the revolution in human intimate interactions, I think.
Mm-hmm,
If you want to see
They're
where
certainly writing the dictionary.
the mainstream is headed in 10, 20 years, look to the BDSM community of today.
Yeah. That's quotable. That's quotable as shit.
Thank you. So is Scream Sponge. I think it's important for people to pick their Scream Sponges wisely and to also recognize your limits of being somebody else's Scream Sponge. Like how many
Yes.
screams
You
can
must
you
have a
absorb?
scream sponge. You if you are absorbing other people's screams, you must have a designated place or
to
person
ring yourself
to scream
of
at.
your screams. Yeah.
Yes. But let's go back to the question of how do you know if you're overreacting? I would look for the physiological response. Because to me, an overreaction is like an over excitation. Is it excitation? Whatever. The excessive energy that comes from uncertainty, allowing thoughts to just kind of run rampant. You can often find that your heart rate has increased, your breathing has become rapid and more shallow. You can feel a global or localized within your body sense of alertness and panic, or just kind of extra irritability or touchiness. All of those things are signals that your emotional state is heightened. So you may just want to be a little skeptical of the thoughts that you're having, just challenging them. Like, okay, I wonder if maybe this is, excuse me, I wonder if this is maybe wrapped up in my body's sense of panic or my nervous system kind of heightening the stakes. And maybe I would be better served by slowing down my breathing, extricating myself from what's creating that panic. Like if you're finding yourself reading the news or something and you're elevating, turn that off, turn the volume down, and just be with yourself. See if you can slow down the pace of those physiological responses, and then start to bring in a sense of, okay, now what feels different? Am I thinking differently about this? Am I approaching this with more groundedness and stability?
I like the alternative approach of acting through the like expressing the energy. Whether you're if you're pent up inside, it could be like doing as many burpees or as dancing or jumping jacks or something, like getting moving with the energy that you feel. That like I haven't been doing this, but it sounds more appealing to me than like trying to slow my internal reactions and like calm myself down. What feels like oppressively, like that feels like a form of self-denial to me, and one that I think I've been doing through distraction, mostly like by focusing on news, YouTube videos of news reports, reading discussions online. I have since we've seems like we've taken similar positions to how severe this is, but I may be on the side of advocating additional caution, slightly more conservative than you are at this moment. What? Okay, I'd like to run a thought experiment with you. If you knew that you had the coronavirus right now and that you were likely to infect other people that you came into contact with, how would your behavior change from what you're doing currently? And then the follow-up is, what would have to happen for you to start acting that way without a test that confirmed that you had it? Like,
okay, so if I felt that I knew that I had it, I knew that I was infected, I would not be investigating the possibility of, discussing with my clients individually, like, do you want to have an in-person session? I would not be discussing that possibility with, any intimate partners. I would migrate my interactions to virtual only. And yesterday I did have a moment where I had one of those, like, oh my God, there's a tickle in my throat. Do I have coronavirus? And so I didn't see anyone all of yesterday. And I knew that, I had a couple of impending potential personal interactions and I was going to just monitor. But yesterday I rested. I ate well. I drank a lot of water. And that tickle that I was noticing completely is gone, which is certainly not to say that I think that because I'm asymptomatic for coronavirus that I can't transfer it to other people. However, I also do think, I'm in presenting a sort of devil's advocate opinion, I know that the people that I'm interacting with are not immunocompromised. And if we did infect one another, we have the capacity to take care of ourselves at home and not overburden the healthcare system. And I do think I tend to live my life in a more, okay, I'm taking a calculated risk kind of way. I know that there is a very real sort of selfishness or denial of potential other outcomes to that mentality. And I try to be as conscious of that as possible, but also try to be conscious of, okay, how am I helping another person by having an in-person interaction, potentially.
Right, there's a cost benefit.
And how am I helping myself? It's a cost benefit analysis.
So what would need to happen in your life or in the news in order for you to make a hard cutoff of anything that you do that could infect another person or you could receive an infection from another person?
I'm not that far from that line. As I said, I was sort of towing it yesterday.
Can you imagine an event that would prompt that behavioral change?
I mean, yeah, I guess it would have to be somewhat of like, okay, what am I experiencing with my body? Am I expelling germs at a rate that I can't control, of like coughing and all that stuff? Obviously, that would be symptoms of coronavirus.
I'll give you
I don't know.
people's response.
Just go ahead.
For many, I think the turning point has been known recent contact with somebody who has tested positive. Has forced a lot of people, like Senator Ted Cruz is now in isolation for the second time. I could see currently we don't have easy access to testing. If that keeps up, I could see as more and more people announce or disclose to people in private that they are testing positive, multiple like resurgences of, okay, I have to cut off all contact because I could be a carrier. And if you can't get testing without symptoms, then the nature of this is still like, all right, well, then I should do the responsible thing and keep this from spreading.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from people live, and I've seen posts from people that are saying, don't do it at all. Like, don't risk, the lives of people who are elderly or immunocompromised, all of that stuff. Like, stay inside, stay to yourself. And I think that there's a complete fairness to that. I think that that's a very valid assessment. But I also think there has to be somewhere where the line needs to be drawn of like, okay, but like some risk can be assumed. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the most inconsiderate thing I could ever have said in my life. But I also see validity to some maintenance of normalcy or human contact when it seems low risk with people that are not immunocompromised, not exposing themselves to immunocompromised people. But again, this could be the thing that gets me canceled for the rest of my life that I'm saying those words.
No, I think that it's a matter of timing, and there are people like still this weekend. There are governors. You know, the governor of Oklahoma was out to dinner with his family and saying like, "This is still go out to eat, support your local restaurants." And like, it's 2 days later now, and I think that that's quickly shifted.
Yes,
this last week, the world has shrunk rapidly. It feels like the realm of possible acceptable social behaviors has just vanished. Every day, it's like more and more activities evaporate, things that are planned, and so I think that we're on the cutting edge of that, being in a big city and being young people who pay attention to, I don't know the right way to phrase this is, but I think are better informed, like are less easily fooled. I do think that we're being fooled by a lot of things, but so Donald Trump was late to the party on this. I think it's pretty clear that he and people who are just using him as a news source are behind the curve of necessary action and recognizing the severity of this. And if somebody was asleep for the last week, you would have a lot to catch them up on how things have changed. Like every day, it seems like that things get a little bit tighter. So that this is coming out tomorrow might, you might already have a different opinion by the time that people are hearing this.
100%. Yeah, things are so minute to minute that it's like, okay, well, now we have to adapt to this, and okay, now we have to adapt to that, and that definition of what is the new normal just keeps shifting and shrinking, as you're saying at the moment.
So here's a related question that I think this is just my question. How much should I watch the news? How much should I seek updates from the outside world? Is it constant? Should I do it with every waking minute and fall asleep with my phone in my hand?
I think that there is, as you're pointing out with that sort of extreme example, that there is a very wide spectrum of what's possible to do. Again, pointing back to that, there is no appropriate reaction because there just is no script for this. Like so many things in life that are difficult and confusing, and constantly evolving. It's very much about your personal, emotional, psychological bandwidth, physical even bandwidth for how much can you take on. I, in general, tend to be someone who shuts out or has a very, very low bandwidth for news, politics, that sort of thing, because I am someone who my livelihood and functioning is dependent on me remaining highly sensitive, highly empathic, highly caring and invested and deeply. And I am extremely alarmed by what comes from those sources, and it really disrupts my ability to function normally. That may not be the case for everyone. It may be, to varying degrees. And so I think this is a really good opportunity to take internal stock of what feels right for me. And maybe that's something that you've done to some extent since the political climate has been so frightening and polarized, but maybe it's time for an even more fine-tooth comb in terms of the volume of information or the sources of information. That being said, the drawbacks to that are isolation and not having the most up-to-date information, being out of the loop, which I've gotten pretty comfortable with because I just kind of walk out and I have this disclaimer that I don't know and sometimes I don't care. And if someone feels really compelled to share something with me, like, great, then that tells me information about, that helps me to see them more clearly. Maybe less so even than, okay, what does that tell me on a global scale? It's more about, okay, what's important to this person about sharing this with me? And so I think it's about balancing those inputs versus outputs and monitoring, okay, how much is too much? And so where can I scale back? How can I take better care of myself to rebalance from having that kind of information constantly being fed to me? And, you know, with my background in art therapy, a great way that I would recommend to balance the intake is to express and do a doodle, sing a song, do something where you're allowing information that you've processed to some extent just out of you. Release it out into the air. And replenish the space that you have inside of you to contain new information.
Yeah, it's taking a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm eating a lot of fear through my eyeballs and ears, watching the news, reading people's projections. And yeah, I'm kind of taking a shit on the microphone right now, I guess, with you. That's basically what this podcast is. And I'll be honest, I'm glad that we're doing it. This feels better to me. I wanted to avoid this and just be like, oh, we have an excuse to do nothing this week. But now that I'm here, I'm happy that I'm doing this. I haven't checked my phone for the last almost an hour that we've been talking. And that's the first time that's happened today. I have a specific recommendation for this. Oh, what? Checking the phone every hour? That's not even that. That doesn't require coronavirus, but the extent to which that's true is greater today. I think it would be like wise to check the news only at moments where it could affect my behavior. So instead of just leaving the stream on, or kind of what I've been doing the last couple of days, is do a little activity and then be like, oh, it's been a while since I've refreshed Reddit or gone on YouTube and clicked the latest videos from CNN or whatever. I don't need to do that until I'm about to make a decision that risks other people or myself. I think a daily check-in would be a good practice. Preferably, I would say the best time of day might be before dinner. So that I don't need to, because doing it first thing when I wake up is a bad, it just puts me in the headspace of, all right, well, I'm going to keep checking it. It starts me anxious. And doing it right before sleep runs the risk of keeping me awake and, scrolling in bed for an indefinite amount of time, stress eating, all of those, like, that shit can come easily at night and push me towards sleeping in late. I think once a day before dinner, if I can handle that for a confined period of time, maybe a half hour, will be wise. I don't really trust myself to do that, though. I don't think I'm going to do it. I think it's just an ideal.
Why? Tell me why you can't. What challenges are you having?
I think I don't see it as important enough, and it's the risk reward proposition emotionally is just, there's too great of a pull towards that surprising, did you see? Like, that feeling is so attractive that I don't really think that I'm going to avoid the news all day until right before dinner, even if that's my ideal. It's just like, in the moment, I'll get bored or I'll just crave it. It's an addict. It's an informational addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't yet connected the cons of that, the drawbacks of that type of behavior. I don't really suffer from that rock bottom enough yet for me to like really want to conclusively change my consumption patterns. Maybe in a couple days, maybe in a couple weeks, I will, and I'll be like, all right, I need to fucking get this news addiction under control. But at the moment, it still provides me with that rush of, you know, the rush I got telling my friends, being the first one to like see that, oh, the mayor of LA just told us all the restaurants and gyms are closed. Like I got to be the person to post that to the group me group with my friends are on. Like, oh,
And
here's my moment to shine.
Yeah, it feels like a moment to shine. It feels like a time to be an expert or an early adopter.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
I think so. I think there's something more to it than that. Even if I wasn't telling anybody, it's not that I need to get credit for being the first person to inform others. It just feels good. It provides like a little bit of certainty of like something new to process, something to grip with my brain. When right now, a lot of like emptiness and question marks. Here's an answer. Here's a thought that ends in a period instead of a question mark.
That's a really, really good insight. And I think that that's another thing that I would encourage anyone to do who's listening to this or not. But they, of course, if you're not listening, you're not going to hear me encourage you to do this. But
you got to encourage them extra hard. The ones that aren't listening.
I'm going to send them the encouraging vibes out into the webs, into the digital realm.
Just yell it loud enough, and maybe somebody who's playing it through a speaker, it'll blow the speaker, and somebody who wasn't listening before will hear this part.
But just to interrogate just beneath that layer of what is the compulsion? What's behind it? How does it serve you? What kind of, who is it allowing you to be? What role is it allowing you to play? I think it's really interesting. It can uncover a lot about our value systems.
Yeah.
And point to ways that we can get those values to be met by other mechanisms that may be healthier.
What's healthier?
I don't know why I'm so coffee all of a sudden. What's healthier than checking the news? So I guess there's not anything inherently unhealthy about it. It's managing the dosage, like we talked about before. It's like, okay, how am I balancing it with other things? If watching the news makes me feel panicked, disconnected, and angry, what can I do to make me feel calm, connected, and appeased or soothed or I don't know. I don't know what the direct opposite of anger is. Released. It's monitoring, okay, what else am I connecting to? What other sources would be a counterbalance to this? Because again, it's like, it's not inherently unhealthy to watch the news. At this moment, and to the volume that people are doing it, yeah, by and large, it is. But yeah.
I'd like to ask another question.
Please.
All kind of in the same wheelhouse. This one comes from a Reddit user, modeled Jenga Pro 44. I want to be productive, then I'm not, and it makes me feel bad. Is it okay to do nothing right now?
Yeah, that is such a good question.
Thank you. I made it up. There's no modeled Jenga Pro, whatever I said.
Well, I think it's important to just start by acknowledging that like a lot of us have that exact same question. And I don't think there is one right answer for any one person at any one time. I would direct your ear inward for signs. Do I need to rest right now? Is my body tired? Or is my body numb? And maybe I could benefit from doing something, inviting something else in, creating something? Or do I really just kind of need this opportunity to rest? Because I think for a lot of us, that's somewhat of the case, is like we're chronically overworked and overstressed, and this is forcing us to confront that. That being said, I also deeply understand the desire to channel it into something productive. But it's like, okay, what's the right kind of productive? How can we redefine what's productive to be what's healthy for me right now in this moment? And that will change hour to hour. But it's like that continual checking in with yourself to find out, okay, what's the answer right now? What different options can I explore? And if you start to go down one route, you can always reroute. Like if you're like, okay, I'm going to give myself permission to do nothing and to just sit and be. Maybe that feels good for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And then you start kind of getting an itch. Mm-hmm. And maybe you meet that itch with a renewed sense of, okay, I'll do something now, and that really will genuinely feel good. Or is that itch a signal of, okay, this is another invitation to go more deeply into rest? I don't know what the answer is for any individual person. And it's continually tuning into, is my body affirming, yes, this is what it wants to do when you present different options to it? Or is my body or my spirit or my internal guide saying, ooh, no, having resistance to it in a way? And learning your own personal signs and signals through a process of vast trial and error is a really, really important tool to navigating any potential future question or situation.
Yes, I agree. And
I want to know how you specifically have, do whatever you're tempted to do. I just want to hear from you.
I'm tempted to avoid the, like, fear is an avoidance emotion. I have fear of anxiety, and I think I'm avoiding those by being on the phone so much, playing video games, whatever the thing is, watching the news even, is like kind of a type of avoidance of me asking the question, me like sitting in that silence. It's been very, I meditate every morning when I wake up, and I've pushed that back for longer than usual. The last couple days, I'm like, do I really need to today? Like, fuck it. I'll just like start doing things. I've recognized more and more resistance in myself. And I saw a kind of like a closing speech on the Chris Cuomo show on CNN. He's one of their newscasters with a gruff voice. I believe he's the New York governor's brother. And he was making this war metaphor, which Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, I think, also made at the last debate on Sunday, that we've entered a war with this virus, and I'll just expand upon it. I feel like I've been drafted, and that everybody has, whether you're a young adult male or not, doesn't really matter. And the way that we fight the war is really to do nothing. Like, if you starting at the extreme of like whatever position you're in right now, if you didn't move from that for 2 weeks, would you be okay? Like, what would you'd be covered in poop and pee. You'd probably die of dehydration. So you do need to at least get water. That's like the one thing that I'll concede that a person has to do. But he made the point of like people who are worried right now. He was kind of talking down in that, like, come on, you're a bunch of babies. Like, we spend all of our time trying to set up our Netflix and like our home entertainment and make everything very easy for ourselves and comfortable online, and like having all the media services that we do. And now you're just being asked to stay at home and like do that. It's not that. It's not like you're being sent to Vietnam. So like, just do that. Do your part to fight this by like being very considerate. And so I think that on the one hand, I want to be like I'm kind of doing it right now by stating my views on these things. Like, this is severe, and I'm trying to educate other people on the severity of it, because it's been ramping up over the last couple of weeks, and I didn't take it as seriously a week ago as other people around me. And then they convinced me that, like, no, this is serious. Radically change your behavior immediately. Like, you start sacrificing more things that you want to do. So it's okay to do nothing, basically. Like, I'm trying to give myself that permission. This is my question. The things that I'd want to do are to say, like, I became a piano virtuoso, or like I journaled the story of my life, or I read that epic book that I said I'd wanted to be doing, or I like redid my apartment and everything. Like, I recondoed everything, and like to have some story that like proves to other people that I took proper advantage of this opportunity and didn't waste it. That's something that I'm battling with right now, and losing that battle. And I think my first, like, shame isn't a good motivator for me in these situations. It just makes me identify with, like, oh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, so I must be like a loser or a coward or whatever name, and then I just continue to behave in that way. So I'm trying to start with like it's okay for me to do nothing for as long as this lasts. I'm scared saying that out loud right now, but like, people are going to die if I don't properly educate my parents or like check in on certain things like that. But I think this is kind of a test of like, are you okay being inactive? It's a little free advice for all listeners. I've heard a lot of people talking about whether to go travel, be with their family right now. And like parents summoning their kids home. I think it's a terrible idea. I get the impulse. Like, if this is going to last a long time, you want to be with your family, and you don't know if you're a carrier. Like, that's going to make it worse. If everybody flees, if all the young people flee to the elderly people right now. Also, I don't need to go there, but plenty of people might idealize what it would be like to be home, and then find that you're actually gonna need to or end up escaping or seeking more social interactions because you're around your parents.
I really want to speak to the main thing that I heard in what you said, which is that all of this internal rationalizing and wondering boils down to, what am I proving to other people about how I spend this time? It seems like
I'm
you're
being
not
asked
asking.
A lot. Are you also? Are people saying like, how are you dealing? How are you doing?
Yes. However,
Yeah.
I have and I'm not trying to say like shame on you for not doing this, because I go in and out of being able to do this. But at the moment, I am happy with what I am doing. And so I don't really care what someone else thinks about it. And I think it's more of like, how do I move the needle toward getting more authentic with what I actually want for myself? And then that internal sort of pride and settledness about it kind of comes into play, versus how am I calibrating thinking out to that external layer of when I'm asked about it. If I'm deciding what I should do based on what answers am I going to have to the people that ask, you're not looking at what you really need. That's my opinion.
I think
but I see a lot of that.
Yeah. When I hear you use this language, I think it's dangerous right now for people to widespread be thinking like that. Like, I think that this is a time for shame to be active in the to control people's behavior, and for people not to be thinking of themselves first.
I mean when you're thinking about questions like, okay, am I going to force myself to be a piano virtuoso versus am I going to go to the grocery store and cough on everyone?
Right.
Just do different questions.
Right. Here, my answer to this question then is, as long as I'm not sharing fluids with other people in the broadest sense. It doesn't really matter what I do. There's degrees of quality. I could like get really fat and be very inactive during this time, and then it's just going to take me longer to pull myself back out of this, or like potentially ingrain some habits that I won't kick after whenever, you know, this fall or this, who knows how long this will last. But like, there's two categories of bad that like, there's the relative bad of like, okay, I didn't really feel good today because I was trapped in a like addictive consumption cycle. But that's acceptable compared to fighting for the other team, like picking up a gun and joining the virus's cause by like going to a party, or you know,
right,
unnecessary contact.
I'm trying to speak to that internal battle of how can I optimize how I'm spending my time, and I think that is symptomatic of the same mentality that on a cosmic level we're being asked to pull away from, in terms of like, we have to this is not true of everyone, because some people are fully expected to perform their jobs with no interruption. But for people whose lives have been sort of paused and their duties, so to speak, have been paused, I think it's a radical like opportunity to disconnect from identifying with ourselves as productivity-based beings, to reconnect with, okay, what are the beautiful things about the human experience? The beautiful things about the human experience are not my 9-to-5 job. They are being with loved ones, taking care of myself, feeling love and connection.
At the top of your list.
Listen, the only loved ones you may have right now are myself. Yeah. And so maybe it's about deepening your relationship with yourself. Maybe it's about creating more space around how much time can I spend by myself without going nuts? How can I offer a different type of attention? How can I build a skill set that I'm able to ignore 99% of my life? I think there's potential for us to really reevaluate what is necessary and what is not in this capitalist, productivity-based, all of my self-worth is my paycheck kind of. I think that's a very unhealthy, dangerous, slippery slope. And so for the people who have the opportunity to disconnect from that, doing the deeper work of, okay, what does this mean? How do I now value myself? How do I now get in touch with my bigger priorities and reorient my life to some extent, to be in better alignment with those, versus just, you know, doing the tasks that someone above you says you have to do.
Yeah. I have that voice in my head that says this is an opportunity to do all those things and to take a proper perspective on life. And I forgive myself for not doing any of them for as long as I want. I don't have to use this time to get a better perspective on life, to do any of the work. If I want to watch movie, if it's movie marathon, I'm trying to forgive myself for that. That's okay. Just so long as I'm not infecting other people, I think it's okay to avoid the bigger questions right now. And I wonder, like, here's the resistance in me. Is the baseline level of fear right now going to cause people to, if you're, say you want to do the whole life reevaluation thing, where maybe you change your relationship, change course of your career, is that like extra conservative, just rightfully extra conservative mind state going to color people's plans in a way that they won't be sustainable, or they won't actually be chasing? Like, will it cause people to just choose safe things if you're planning on doing any like big life figuring out stuff right now?
Yeah.
So if you
Well-
want that excuse, it's there for you to avoid all of your planning and determining like everything may be seen through dark gray glasses right now.
And everyone needs something different. Some people need to have a time of being steeped in a doomsday philosophy. Some people need to feel what it feels like to be really restricted. Some people need to scramble to think about, okay, how can I think about different channels of income? I don't think, like I said from the beginning, there isn't one prescription that's the right thing for every single person. I can only really point to here's where I see opportunity and here's where I see value coming from the perspective that I have, and offering that as an invitation to anyone who that resonates with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I can really only speak to like my experience.
Sure.
And my experience right now is more disconnected than it normally is, to some extent.
Do you have anything that you'd recommend for people who are looking to escape in some way, something to occupy themselves? There's this podcast, which hasn't really given you much of a...
Not too escapist at the
in
moment.
some ways, though, like listening to someone else think about it for you is kind of a way of escaping your own thoughts, or like driving that narrative yourself.
Sure.
You know, you get to judge them.
Yeah.
You get to like...
Yeah.
I have
yeah.
one.
I have a
this is
couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Something that helped me a lot after a breakup. I think that that's like a good place to look for sudden loss of connection. What did you do in those times? Think of the worst breakup of your life. What were the things that you leaned on, and what did you learn from leaning on that? Did you do it too much in some ways? Were there costs of that? So that's just like a general question for you, the listener. One thing that I loved while driving, while kind of in the background, first off, it's okay to avoid feelings sometimes. You don't that's a controversial maybe in my ideal is often that like, oh yeah, you should just face feelings when they come, and like it's okay to do some avoidance.
It's a bandwidth question.
Yeah. You only have room for so much at any time, so like
Yes.
it can be okay to delay things until later. If you do it your whole life, then you may end up dying alone. But never making sense
Or
of
just
anything.
living a
Confused
life
and
that
alone.
isn't what you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And then having regrets.
Never
down
even
the road,
having
yeah.
wants or being aware of them. So that is dangerous. But at the other end, if you do want to avoid things, which I'm saying is okay to do, especially now, aside from avoiding the threat of being in large groups of people, don't avoid that thought. But it's this comedy radio show called that Mitchell and Webb Sound. I'll post a link to the episodes. It's these two British guys just doing sketch comedy that works in an audio format. So there's a lot of these episodes, and it's just kind of, it's absurd. It feels a little sophisticated because they have British accents. I don't know. I like the feeling of listening to comedy and with that British tone. So I'm going to post a link to that in the episode description. I think those are great. That's a lovely escape, and just reminds me to, even if I'm not like in a laughing mood, it doesn't have to make me laugh to give me that little like just bit of joy that might even be unexpressed.
Yeah.
That surprise itch that I want scratched by the news, it can give me just like a different way of like, oh, there's a surprise because I didn't see that unexpected twist in this little comedy. You know, like 3 to 5 minutes each sketch, you know, like of Key and Peele or something like that, but in an audio format. Okay. That's mine. Maybe you had time to think of something that you recommend.
Yeah.
Something on Netflix,
So
a book,
a couple
whatever.
things that have occurred to me.
Yeah, what?
I sent you this link yesterday. It was something that someone in my network passed along of virtual tours of museums.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't click that.
That's okay. It was just sort of like building a little resource pool. And that is available at travelandleisure.com. It's called Stuck at Home. These 12 famous museums offer virtual tours you can take on your couch. And the other thought I had is, which I haven't really looked into it myself, but I'm sure it's out there, is like live webcams of cute animals or things like that, where it's just like, oh, all I want to do right now is watch a puppy. I'm sure that still exists. And I think watching animals activates something within us that's very primal and comforting. So I think that's another thing that I would recommend as an escapist kind of avenue.
I love it. You've made me want to get a webcam.
Yeah, I thought about doing that for my rabbits, but nah. I don't have a bunch of like extra income I'm throwing around on like something that's, I mean, it could generate income, of course. I could start doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be something that I could log into when I want to check on them.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'll change my mind on that. But for
like
now,
you just
no
did.
bunny webcam.
Okay. All right.
If I have time. Yeah. If I have time, maybe I'll start with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
All right. How you feeling at the end of this thing?
I feel good.
I'm smiling.
Good. Fuck yeah. I mean, I came into it feeling good. Being that my career is providing emotional support, I feel extremely valuable in this strange post-apocalyptic world. And I've been thinking about different ways that I can provide support remotely. And if you're interested in that and you're listening to this, that is accessible, or will be by the time this is released, at morganbeard.coach. So I'm offering a guided meditation for managing quarantine stress, and a lot of the practices that I recommended here of going inwards and just seeing what information your body has, as well as discounted remote sessions with people. And I'm doing a Facebook Live, which is something that I had never done before the quarantine, but just I saw a beautiful example of a community that I'm in doing that, offering an ecstatic dance live experience that was virtual. And I was really inspired by it and just thought, you know what? I can just open myself up live, sitting in my living room, with my sweatpants on and just be there for people and provide both myself with that sense of value and connectedness, and anyone who wants to take advantage of that. And so, yeah, my Facebook page is Morgan Hill Beard, which is my full name. So if anyone's looking for that type of non-escapist route, that's where you can find me.
I'm going to check out your online offerings. I want to see.
Hell yeah.
What it's like when you go live. I'll invite you onto the big screen, my big projector on my wall, see a 6-foot version of your face in my living room while you're in your sweatpants.
Fuck yeah.
I'm going to see what that's like
And
tonight. Maybe
yes,
tomorrow,
good.
And every night after that.
Yeah, the recordings will live on after the
I'm
live
only doing it live.
event ends. Oh, okay. That's
I'm
fair.
not gonna
That's
watch
within
the
your
recording.
rights.
I listened to your voice recorded enough with this podcast.
Enough. Yeah, there's so many different ways to do that. And if you're listening to this and thinking you want to get in touch with us in a free advice way, you can always reach us at freeadvicepodcast@gmail.com, whether
That's
it's
right.
questions, comments, any kind of feedback, anything. We totally welcome it, and look forward to getting the chance to communicate with you.
Mm-hmm. She said it, guys. That's it. We're gonna keep this up.
Yep.
That's my plan. So you'll be hearing more
Every
from
week.
us as this develops.
You will hear us.
And if you're feeling alone, you're not alone in that. Okay.
Yes.
Sleep tight, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.